Okay, calling the 9:45 Ways and Means Judiciary Committee to order. This meeting, including the audio and video of remote participants, is being streamed live on YouTube. You will find links to viewing options on our Senate meetings on live and demand video page of the legislature's website. In the event we have to end this hearing due to technical difficulties, the committee will reconvene to discuss any outstanding business on Friday, February 23rd, 10:29 in this room. A public notice will be posted on our website. For those participating remotely, you will be muted until it is your turn to testify. We will be enforcing a 1-minute limit on testimony. A timer will be visible. If there are technical glitches and we need to move on, we have your written testimony. Okay, first item, SB 3175. We have tax.
Good morning, Gary Siganuma, Director of Taxation. The department strongly supports this administration measure, which will assist the department with its tax enforcement efforts. The measure would allow the department to serve administrative subpoenas outside the state. So currently, the department is authorized to serve subpoenas in a civil audit, investigation, or hearing, or in a criminal investigation. However, the statutory law that authorizes us to, to do subpoenas provides that the administrative subpoena may be served at any place within the state. So currently, the law is silent as to whether or not we can serve subpoenas outside the state. The reason that this is a problem is because with the growing e-commerce industry, there are many taxpayers engaged in business in the state who either do not have a physical presence in the state or who do not have and do not have an agent for service of process within the state. And so we have to serve them outside the state. Some of these taxpayers may be liable for taxes in Hawaii, depending on how much business they conduct in the state. But we won't know until we can get information from them. And so what this bill will authorize, the bill will authorize us to serve these out-of-state taxpayers with subpoenas so that we can obtain information on their tax liability here in the state and hold them accountable for meeting their tax obligations to Hawaii. So I would urge the committees to pass this measure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any questions?
Yes,
Senator
no, that director. So it sounds like to me, you folks already have subpoena power, except you want to be able to investigate instead of just asking them questions. You want to be able to do an administrative subpoena out of state?
Yes.
Okay, we don't have an attorney general's opinion on this, but how do you folks, I mean, e-commerce has been around for decades. So how do you folks able to get the investigative records before this bill?
Well, so if there's a taxpayer that is headquartered outside the state, but they have an agent for service within the state.
Yeah, then you serve, right?
Then that's not a problem for us. It's these taxpayers that we can't locate in the state for service of a subpoena. And then currently, even if we try to serve them outside the state, they could hire their lawyer and they could interpret the statute as you can ignore the subpoena because arguably we don't have authority to do that.
Okay, so director, the reason I'm asking is because this is like first year law school. The very first case we had to do, right? Which is Panoia versus Smith.
Yes.
Personal jurisdiction, personal contacts, right? Seems to me that even if we allow this, you're still gonna have to have, because I've served subpoenas out of state before. You're still gonna need to have another court within that state to approve the subpoena, otherwise it's unenforceable. So how do you folks, even if we pass this, how do you expect a Hawaii court with no contacts in the other state, because otherwise, if there's an agent, we have personal jurisdiction, right? But you're talking about non-personal jurisdiction.
I don't believe that the state in which a taxpayer resides or is physically present would have to bless the subpoena, or it's not like certifying a judgment that we're trying to enforce in the other state. So really, the taxpayer would be able to challenge a subpoena, or we could try to enforce a subpoena. It would be in a local court. The court would then have to make a decision, a person, do we have jurisdiction over the taxpayer to enforce a subpoena? So we'll let the courts handle that. All we want to do is be able to serve the subpoena, because we don't even get to first base, if we don't have this authority. And so that's all we're trying to do.
Okay. I still think you're gonna have problems, but that's not for me to decide. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, Tax Foundation.
Good morning, chairs, vice chairs, members of the committees. Tom Yamachika from Tax Foundation of Hawaii. We stand on written testimony and will be available for questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. And then Ben Robinson. Anyone else wishing to testify? Okay, next item. SB 3176, DOTAX.
Good morning, Gary Sugunuma, Director of Taxation. The department strongly supports this administration measure, which is intended to discourage taxpayers from ignoring the department's requests for information and or document requests during an audit. So the statutes governing the audit procedures for income tax, estate tax, general excise tax authorizes the department to examine all account books, bank statements, records, vouchers, copies of federal tax returns, and any other documents and evidence having any relevancy to the particular tax at issue in the audit. It is a misdemeanor for someone who willfully fails to supply information at the time or times required by law. Okay, however, there is currently no statutory deadline for taxpayers to comply with a department's request during an audit. So what this bill seeks to do is to clarify that the time required by law for taxpayers to supply information during an audit is a statutory deadline of 20 days after a written demand is mailed by our department, subject to an extension as deemed reasonable by the Director of Taxation. So really what this measure is trying to address is the taxpayer that completely ignores requests during an audit. If a taxpayer is in contact with us and they need more than 20 days to respond, certainly we're going to work with them, right? Because if they blow the 20-day deadline to respond, the measure also has a sanction in there, which says that the requested information that was withheld and not provided cannot be used in any subsequent court proceeding. But there is a reasonable cause exception. So if the taxpayer can show, so even if we went to court and we tried to exclude the evidence saying that they didn't produce it during the audit, the taxpayer still has the defense of, hey, wait, I have reasonable cause. So if they ask for an extension and we were unreasonable in granting them more time, to me, that's reasonable cause. So really, it's not to address, we're not trying to set up a technicality where we can, capitalize and have an advantage over the taxpayer. This is really to address the taxpayer, like I said, that's completely ignoring us during the audit.
Thank you.
So-
Members, any questions?
Thanks, Director. So just the mechanics of it currently, if you're audited, what do you I don't know what the phraseology is. You certify the audit and say, here's our final decision. You owe us X number of dollars.
Yeah, so what happens is, we open the audit, there's a discovery phase where information is exchanged. So oftentimes the department needs information to determine whether taxes are owed and how much. And so right now informally, we send them letters. There's no statute saying, the letter will have a deadline,
But at the end of the audit,
an assessment.
There's an assessment. Okay,
Yes,
so
there's-
then they can, so the taxpayer can appeal the assessment to somebody?
That's correct. The Board of Review or tax appeal court,
Do they have to go to board of review first, or is it,
they don't. It's an
They-
option.
they can go
choose
straight to
go.
tax court, which is in the
That-
judiciary?
That's correct.
Okay, so my question really is about, the bill also says that if you don't give the documents over within the 20 days, then you can exclude that from an appeal. How does, that seems counterintuitive to me, because you're in the executive branch and the judiciary is in the judiciary branch, the judges in the judiciary branch. Can we actually do that? Or can the judge just say, hey, you know what? We're gonna let everything in anyway.
Yeah, again, but I think in that case, the judge would be able to consider the evidence if upon a finding of reasonable cause for not producing it during the audit.
Okay, so the part of the bill that it says you can't, you can have that evidence excluded probably doesn't hold up if they take it to the court.
That's correct. If they can establish reasonable cause in the eyes of the court, then the court can consider that
Undo
evidence for
it.
sure.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, thanks, Chair.
Question. So the 20 days deadline, is that calendar days or work days?
It's a good question. I don't know that it's specified, but
Yeah,
We could.
because if you're gonna do it over the
It's
Christmas holidays, that's almost not enough time. I think you guys should specify that.
we can do that. And we're even open to adjusting the amount of days too. We put 20 days. If you think that's too short or too long, you can adjust it as well.
Yeah, but you're just having people have to call you guys and make it busy for yourself when it just should be more explanatory.
Understood.
Just one question. So you say that they have to show reasonable cause if they don't meet the deadline. What is the process? Do they go to you? Who says it's reasonable or not reasonable? And
Ultimately, the sanction would be a sanction that would impose during a judicial proceeding. And so ultimately the judge.
they do have to take it to court.
Yeah, it's no different than the judge applying a rule of evidence.
So you could, so it's all going to court then if they miss the deadline for giving you documents.
So if they choose not to provide documents during the audit, then what this is designed to do is it's designed to discourage that by letting the taxpayer know that you proceed at your own peril. If you want to proceed this way, you go to court. You may be disadvantaged because if you cannot establish reasonable cause, you can't use that evidence. You know, to the extent it helps you, you won't be able to use it.
There's a deterrent.
Deterrent, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my question is, and it goes towards Chair Rhodes' question. Why don't you just refer to rules of court instead of putting it in statute? Because this, you're basically are having by statute what is normally rules of discovery in the court rules. And this is beyond, okay, I mean, you're talking about 20 days. Normal discovery rules are 30 days upon receipt. And, you know, regular court rules is allowing for mailing. And for those of us on the neighbor island, where right now we're having like 1 to 2 week delays, this one says upon mailing, which means upon the time you put it in the mailbox, the 20 days count. Why can't you just refer to rules of discovery pursuant to court rules? And you could say which court, you know, rules of civil procedure. That way, there isn't this automatic penalty that all of the other people are referring to, because frankly, I understand that, okay? Especially for those whose documents burn up. How the heck are you gonna come up with like within 20 days upon mailing, and you're in a neighbor island to come up with a basis for a house that you wanted to sell? Or those of us who inherit a house, you got to come up with within 20 days the basis of your, you know, upon the appraisal upon inheritance, right? It's super difficult to come up with tax
Okay, what are you
documents.
suggesting?
I'm sorry. I think this should be amended to refer to, tax court rules of discovery, where the court then determines the amount of penalty instead of an automatic deduction.
Well, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't see this as a discovery sanction, right? The discovery conducted in a case, in a suit, is conducted under that set of rules, but this really is a sanction for not complying with the tax statute. And so, there are a lot of statutes that limit a claimant's right in court, right? Statutes of limitation. There are statutes everywhere that says you don't have a private cause of action against the government. So so these kinds of rules exist outside of court rules. And so I think this is the appropriate place to put it.
But according to your answer to Chair Rhodes, the result of this is to go to court. So then you have additional discovery rules. But in the meantime, you're already penalized according to this, because it says shall not, it says shall. It doesn't say may. It says shall.
Unless reasonable
Not-
cause can be shown. So that is the intent.
Okay, I have problems with that, so.
So, and I understand, the reasonable cause, yeah, and that's where you give ample amount of time for production, or to say, by the way, my house was burnt, or I got flooded, and start the conversation. So my question is, what problems has the department had with taxpayers who have not provided the documents and evidence that you have
Yes.
requested?
So it's pretty common. So what happens is we open audit, we ask for information, we get ignored, we ask repeatedly, get ignored. We spend time following up, trying to contact the taxpayer, it doesn't happen. We issue an assessment based on the best available information, which we can do. And then taxpayer then appears, files an appeal with the court. And then for the first time during the lawsuit, they bring out all the information that we asked for. And they bring it out because it helps them. And so we spend a lot of time and resources preparing and issuing the assessment, only to find out that if they had provided this earlier, there wouldn't be a need for an assessment. And so that we're shorthanded, all the departments are struggling to fill vacancies. We're trying to find a way to make the most efficient use of our personnel. And so I think this will help a lot.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, we can go into, yeah, Tax Foundation.
Thank you, chairs, vice chairs, members of the committee. Tom Yamachika for Tax Foundation of Hawaii. We share many of the same concerns that were expressed in not only our testimony, but Mr. McClellan's testimony. We do share Chair Rhodes's concern that what the heck is this statute doing, trying to tell the judiciary what they can and can't consider as evidence. There's, I think, a separation of powers issue there. And, this 20-day one-size-fits-all rule, which the department, certainly can expand or contract at its discretion. Sometimes you just don't think the auditor is going to be giving you a fair shake. And that's, the problem that some of my clients have faced and that other practitioners have faced. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Tax Foundation?
Sorry,
For Tax Foundation?
the toll tax, because I just wanted to know if they know that House Bill HB 24887 was deferred in Hawaiian Affairs and Judiciary Committee.
I was there.
Yeah, I just wanted. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Okay, next, Richard McClellan. Opposed? Anyone else wishing to testify? Okay, we can go into decision making. So the first one, SB 3175. Recommendation is to adopt LRB tech amendments. Any discussion? If not, chair votes aye.
For SB 3175, pass with amendments. Chair Delacruz, aye. Vice Chair, aye. Senator Aquino.
Aye.
Senator Decoit.
Aye.
Senator Hashimoto.
Aye.
Senator Inoue.
Aye.
Senator Kanuha. Senator Kim. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Kidani.
Aye.
Senator Lee.
Aye.
Senator Shimabukuro.
Aye.
Senator Wakai.
Yes.
Senator Favela.
Aye.
Chair, recommendation adopted.
Okay, for JDC members on SB 3175, recommendation is to pass with tech amendments. Questions or concerns? If not, Vice Chair.
Chair Rhodes,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rhodes, Senator Elafante. Aye. Senator San Bonaventura.
Aye.
Senator Owa.
Aye.
Measure passes.
Thank you. Next item. SB 3176. So recommendation will be to adopt LRB tech amendments and we'll change the 20 days to 30 business days. To kind of address some of the members' concerns. Any discussion? If not, chair votes aye.
So on SB 3176, Chair votes aye, Vice Chair votes aye. All other members with reservations, voting no. Oh, reservations, Senator Favela, voting no. Recommendation adopted.
Okay, for JDC members, same recommendation, SB 3176 with amendments. Questions or concerns? If not, Senator Gabbard.
Members present, are there any reservations or no votes?
No.
No vote for Senator San Bonaventura. The measure passes.
No, over too.
And Senator Owa as well. 3 aye votes and no votes. Measure passes.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna call to order the Ways and Means Judiciary Joint Committee 9:46 a.m. agenda. This meeting, including the audio and video of remote participants, is being streamed live on YouTube. You will find links to viewing options for all Senate meetings on the live and on-demand video page. It is in the unlikely event we have to end this hearing due to technical difficulties. The committee will reconvene Friday, February 23rd and 29th. This is decision-making or testimony. If you're interested in viewing written testimony, please go to our website. You'll find a link on the status page. Okay, first item, SB 578. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, and inserting between page 1, lines 10 to 11, that the legislature further finds that there is a labor shortage that makes it difficult to fill investigator management positions in the Department of Agriculture. And adding additional positions from the Department of Agriculture to be added to section 88.-9 as there is a labor shortage or it's categorized as a difficult to fill position. Okay, so the reason why we're adding Department of Ag is they have the most vacancies. They're at 33% vacant. So when we met with the Attorney General, she wanted to fill the investigator positions. They can only find retirees. So this allows the state to hire retirees so it doesn't affect the benefits. Instead of doing the 89-day hire, this is what we had talked about. So the Attorney Generals had the difficulty, and then because we found that Department of Ag had the most vacancies at 33%, we added Department of Ag. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So any discussion? If not, chair votes aye.
SB 578, all members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservations, recommendation adopted.
JDC members, same recommendation as SB 578 with amendments. Questions or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
All members present, are there any no votes or reservations? Hearing none, the measure passes.
I know, you were gonna just pass with text, right? Maybe we can take a recess and talk to Michelle about it. But I don't, we want the person I was going to go, it's criminal anyway. Somebody, the first person to tell the good faith response, I think the other thing is number 3.
Okay, we can defer to end of calendar. All right. Okay, next item, we're just gonna defer to end of calendar. Next item, SB 2512, recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopting LRB tech amendments. Any discussion? Not chair votes aye.
SB 2512, all members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservations, recommendation adopted.
Oh, sorry, for JDC, same recommendation. Questions or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
For SB 2512, all members present, any no votes or reservations? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Thank you. Next item. SB 2640, recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, and adopt the Attorney General's proposed language for cash recipients. Any discussion?
So I'm sorry, on the cash recipients, does that mean then? So there's, that's fine, that's fine. Go ahead.
If no further discussion, chair votes aye.
Okay, all members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservation?
No vote.
Oh, no. No vote for Fidela, Senator Fidela.
Reservations.
Reservation for Decoit. Okay. Recommendation adopted.
Oh, I'm sorry, same recommendation for the JDC. Questions or concerns? If not, Vice Chair.
On SB 2640, any no votes or reservations? Hearing none, the motion passes.
On the last one. Okay, next item, SB 2645. Is anybody from DHHL here? Yeah.
Aloha, Katie Ducat, Deputy Director for DG.
Thank you. Good morning. So this bill establishes a law enforcement within the DHHL.
That's correct, yes.
So is there a reason why the department could not work with the law enforcement agency?
So this is a legislative initiative based on feedback from our beneficiaries. And so we have had a lot of discussions about why can't DHHL work with other law enforcement agencies. There is, of course, the county police departments. And of course, there's also the Department of Law Enforcement that was recently created. And we are working with those agencies. We're trying to establish relationships. However, there is definitely a sentiment that those outside agencies don't know the department enough, aren't responsive enough, and our beneficiaries do wish to have their own unit that is dedicated to the Department of Hawaiian Homelands that can react. The idea is that they would react faster to complaints on Hawaiian Homelands, and that they would be better equipped to deal with issues on Hawaiian Homelands, which is not always criminal. Sometimes a lot of the things that we deal with is issues that we would like to deal with that would result in the cancellation of a lease. And so that's not always criminal. Sometimes they're not, there are other things that happen on the homelands that don't involve criminal activity.
And law enforcement would have the ability to carry firearms.
Currently, so that's the current issue. Right now, we have compliance officers and they're not deputized, they're not authorized under the law to have all of the abilities of enforcement officers like to carry a weapon.
So that's what the department would like to
The
see?
department would like to have that. The idea comes from a commissioner whose experience was as a former DLNR officer with DoCare. So it's kind of trying to take ideas from that and have a unit that basically would function in that way, right? So they would write citations for things that would be criminal in nature. And then it would also facilitate us when the nature of the offense actually goes toward not a criminal act, but would actually go towards more the administrative function of canceling a lease possibly.
So we're still building out the law enforcement agency. And yet this would ultimately how many officers did DHHL see as part of this effort?
Currently, what this bill, I believe, envisions is, if I'm not mistaken, 6 FTE positions. And the idea was that one would be in every office, because we do have neighbor islands, and that's where the need is sometimes if they're all here on Oahu. But it would contemplate sometime in the future building that out. But right now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's 6 FTE.
Okay, and the fiscal ask is 500,000.
That's right.
Any questions?
So what is the ongoing cost to sustain this? And then you also said you want to build it out. So what are we talking about? What cost we're talking about?
So there would be ongoing, well, first of all, we would have to fill those positions, and that has been an issue. I'll admit to that. So we first have to find the officers, assuming that we can do that and then sustain it. We would have a recurring personnel cost for those positions. The bill contemplates 500,000. I believe if you talk to our lead compliance officer or the supervisor for the unit, he would contemplate for a response that's 24/7, many more officers. So I don't want to be unreasonable, but I have heard, fulfilling a unit would be in, a 90 to 100 person unit. That would be basically envisioning a entire kind of police force for DHHL. I'm not sure that we're there yet. What we're asking for is just to start with 6 officers that can be much more responsive, especially on the neighbor islands, and assigned to the district offices.
Well, I guess that's my concern, we're going to government and we're going to put a whole nother police force.
Yeah.
And you're starting off at 6, but then, so who's gonna foot this bill ongoing? Is it the beneficiaries? It's gonna come out of their share of the monies, or is it gonna continue to come in for funding from the general fund?
No, we would, so that's why we're here. We would seek general funding year after year. We are trying to avoid using trust funds for personnel costs because of the Nelson case, so.
How many compliance officers do you have?
We have 2. We have 2 on staff currently. I believe we have a number of 3 vacancies. I believe 1 is about to be filled though. So we have 2 vacancies in total.
So you have a total of 5.
5
You have total of 5
currently.
compliance officers, and you're still taking those 5 compliance officers. Wow,
Yes.
you're gonna have 6 and possibly 100,
Yes.
24/7. Well, I think if people think it's needed, then it should come out of somebody's pocket, but not the general fund. I mean, that's why we have police, that's why we public safety. I mean, so is it the next department gonna ask us for their own police force? Something that we're gonna, each department's gonna have their own police force? Is that where we're going?
I can't speak to other agencies, but this is what our beneficiaries is hoping will happen for DHHL.
Okay, so maybe if back to the beneficiary and ask them if they want to sustain the cost. Then,
Chair.
and then come back to us. Thank you.
Senator, oh, was it? You and,
So, I'll just say as a beneficiary myself, we have, issues with the requests. I think that's why we came up with Office of Law Enforcement, was to build, that within, because we knew that the police department couldn't. So what about your vacant positions? Can't you guys use those vacant positions and move those to sustain the so-called enforcement that you folks are looking for?
Yes. So we are heavily recruiting not just enforcement officers, but the HHL is severely understaffed in all areas and enforcement is one of them. So we are trying our best, and I will admit, we are trying our best to fulfill the positions that we currently have. They're not fully staffed at this time.
So you talked about having to remove beneficiaries from leases. As a beneficiary myself, I realized when I sign one lease, as I paid $1 a year to stay compliant. You know, I think within administration, that also needs to be echoed within beneficiary consultation, whether it be island-wide or statewide. I think the priorities that we looked at in beneficiary consultation has always been water, housing, and to get people off the list. The enforcement part, I believe that the department should be working with law enforcement across, whether it be DLNR and DOCARE as well as the new Office of Law Enforcement. So I think that's some of the stuff that we should be discussing within the island-wide and regional plans that is talked about with beneficiaries. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So in my district, there's a number of Hawaiian Homeland's ag lot awards that are not being used. And so there are a number of people in the beneficiary list who want enforcement of that ag requirement so that you either use it or lose it so that someone else from the wait list can use it. If we pass this, will you folks be able to enforce that ag requirement on the leases so that you can cancel the lease and get someone else from the wait list up?
Not necessarily. That's still a policy decision, right? So it's a matter of the leadership's priorities. And so while we recognize that it is an issue, the types of lease violations that we are currently pursuing are those that kind of have immediate impacts to neighboring. So for example, if the vacant ag lot had trespassing and clutter and stuff like that, it would kind of rise to a higher level. But ag lots that are simply not in use and need to be enforced because they haven't built on it, they take a lower priority right now in the scale of how we utilize our limited resources and time.
Okay, one other question. So in my district, some of them want to be able to organize and have like a homeowners association to be able to enforce, I guess, their own CCNRs, but it's not on the lease. If we pass this, would you be able to help them out? I guess like the noises, or what we're getting is a lot of abandoned cars. They pile up.
but
No,
no, I'm just saying that the bill is really about do we add these or not so much those issues.
well, they want them to, if we pass it, will they help them enforce it? That's
But you know what, those issues, we really gotta do it in maybe a separate bill.
okay, thank you.
Chair.
That's it.
I'm not sure how much you guys went out and do the consultation, like Senator DeQuaid said. But the bill is misleading because when we were trying to get the enforcement reinstated with William Isla, when he canceled it and was doing really well, no guns, no building up a police force, it was doing well. Under Isla's administration is when it went downhill and everybody started just being running wild on Hawaiian homes. We don't need a whole bunch of new police force carrying guns. When I had brought this up in the meeting and the commissioner was saying, we cannot deputize neighborhood security watches or who is doing the writing down and giving the information to you guys for the enforcement, we cannot give them guns. And I told them, we're not giving them guns. We're giving them the deputization to put an enforcement that you don't have to pay them. They're really doing it. All we need is somebody from Department of Hawaiian Home says, hi, I'm going to enforce it. Not with a gun. That's the problem right now. You guys think you guys need guns and a police force. You need somebody just to do the job.
Well, what's the training? What would be the training?
They're gonna hire a retired police
Her
officer.
answer.
That's what they're gonna do.
What would be the training?
That is an idea. I'm not, to be quite honest, I'm not sure that the department has considered that. I think they would try to utilize trainings that are already established with other law enforcement agencies.
Okay, follow-up question, Chair.
Wait, we should
Just
just the
one
vote.
quick one, just one
Because it may not pass. So no sense keep going.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Okay.
I have a question, my district, which has the highest concentration of Hawaiians in the state outside of Ni'ihau. This is a huge priority. Because my understanding is that, when there's a lot of issues with gambling houses, drug houses in the homesteads. And when beneficiaries call the police, there's just a lot of confusion because unlike a normal residential landlord tenant code, there's a whole different set of rules that applies when it's homestead land. And so the frustration is that when they call the police usually often aren't sure how to respond, to deal with this is not a typical landlord tenant situation. I mean, that's my understanding of why this bill is being, sought after so much by beneficiaries. Is that correct?
That is correct. But I don't want to, I do know though, and I think it was raised earlier, as far as the HHL, why aren't we seeking relationships with the law enforcement entities that are already in force? So I don't want to give the impression that any of the county police departments are lacking. They are there.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yes.
But to deal with the issue that the senator brought up, why would you need a gun?
We may not. I do know though that the intent and the what the beneficiaries are thinking of is a fully deputized unit. So that would mean someone with the authority to carry weapons, like a fully deputized sheriff, for example, or they're dedicated
Okay,
to
so,
doing all that.
just to make sure that we can keep focused, leave this part just for questions. And when we take the vote and we ask for discussion, that's when you guys can tell us what you feel. Because that's what discussion is for. So, but for now, let's just focus on questions. Okay.
I have a question. Have you folks considered the recommendation from DLE, the new law enforcement? In their comments, they did say that they welcome you into their program, such as the Transportation DOT law enforcement. They dedicated their investigation and complaints to DLE, and DOT is paying the DLE. So how about doing that rather than creating a new enforcement within your agency? Now, another point you talked about leases. This bill does not include their responsibility for leases because you guys should be doing that already. So on the investigation part, do what DLE is already focused on and do what the other agencies are doing.
But going back to her first point, is that a possibility?
It is. It was when this session and DLE was newly formed last session as well. So those points were made. And we, if it turns out that that's really the best use of state resources, that's at your discretion. But I do know that our beneficiaries would prefer its own DHHL unit, and that's what this bill represents.
So have you talked to DLE about the possibility? Because they would have deputies on site so that you could work with them. I don't know if DLE is on board.
We have had DHHL has had conversations with the Department of Law Enforcement.
Question, Mr. Chair, the question would be to go back to the beneficiaries. Do they still want this if they have to pay for it?
So if we amended it to trust funds,
we would have to go back to our beneficiaries and explain, yes, this is the way that it would work. Yes. And so they'd have to understand that.
The question is, The reason why we have this problem on the west side with the gambling on Hawaiian homes, Hawaiian homeland. Question is that we never have a deputized Hawaiian home person to represent the homestead to tell HPD, I want these guys enforced for gambling. That's the job. That's the job that Hawaiian Homes can do tomorrow. If 5 guys that represent the homestead and go to these homes, that's the problem. Nobody was representing the homestead. We like create one whole force.
But what's the question?
The question is that why would we need one whole law enforcement agencies when you guys can deputize non-gun carrying people now to enforce the law with police or law enforcement agency right now? Any one of you from Hawaiian Homes.
Okay,
that
let her
represent
answer.
Hawaiian
Let her
Homes,
answer.
that's what it is.
Okay.
You guys can do that right now.
Yeah, but let her-
I am not, so we can hire people to be compliance officers. That is
Sally Watson
true.
goes to one house right now.
Wait, let her answer the question. Let her answer the question. I understand your passion, but let her answer the question.
So when you use the word deputize, I think that means a certain level of authority that is given to someone. So I think what you're getting at is that, yes, we have compliance officers, not fully staffed, but we do have them. And they could, and they are actually bridging those law enforcement relationships, right? So that they can be the point of contact and call in the resources needed currently.
Okay,
I
so
think
that's
that's
an
the
option
point. Yes.
where you could just have compliance officers that could enlist the assistance of law enforcement.
Yes, and so if that's where this committee, or if that's where the line of questioning is going, we would still ask for more of those if we aren't going to get, a full law enforcement unit.
Okay. Somebody had a question?
I did. So does HPD have authority to go onto Hawaiian homelands when an issue arises?
Yes, they do.
So I'm not sure why we need a separate force, because to me, it's confusing. For instance, if a neighbor or a child sees something, an argument, whether it's parents or neighbors or whatever, who do they call? If they make the wrong call and then they have to call someone, it wastes time. I just see that it's confusing.
Okay. Okay,
Question, Chair.
go ahead.
So, MPD on Molokai called out to address an issue on DHHL. Response is, sorry, we cannot step onto DHHL lands.
And so that is one of the issues that our beneficiaries raised, which is kind of behind the motivation for this, right? We are trying to address that with the separate county police departments. There is case law. It's called, the case's name is State versus Jim. And it does say that the respective county law enforcement agencies do have jurisdiction to enforce criminal laws on Department of Hawaiian Homelands, regardless that it depends on the county. Some are better than others in recognizing that. And it might also depend on the particular officers in that district. Again, some officers are better in the particular district and understanding that better than
So
others.
do you have a record?
Yeah.
We could see how many times you called the local law enforcement and if they responded, and to what level they assisted. You have some kind of documentation, because if not, it's anecdotal.
Yes, it is anecdotal. To my knowledge, we don't keep that kind of data, or we haven't been collecting that kind of data.
So our decision is actually based on data, which is why we're asking, right?
Yes.
And is it the reasoning that you guys are trying to gain statutory powers? Police powers? Is that what the ask is at this point? Aside from the funding?
Yes, that is the ask. That is behind the intent of the original bill. Yes, that is the motivation behind it.
Okay, why don't we just vote? Because we could just keep going. So it sounds to me that there are members who are uncomfortable with the enforcement component. So why don't we leave the compliance program? Delete the enforcement program. Blank the appropriation. And then we can also add language to so that the Department of Hawaiian Homelands can enter into agreements with law enforcement agencies to assist with law enforcement. And then we'll adopt LRB tech amendments and effective date to 2050. Okay, any discussion? If not, chair votes aye.
SB 2645, all members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservation? Recommendation adopted.
Okay, for JDC members on SB 2645, same recommendation. Questions or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair.
All members present, are there any other reservations? Okay, measure passes.
Thank you. Next item, SB 3009. Recommendation is to adopt sections of the law enforcement testimony. Well, before we go into that, why don't we call up law enforcement? Okay, and I think I heard the discussion in the previous committee where I think what was missing though is the fact that the sheriffs was really born out of the judiciary
They were, that is correct. That's their history. Actually goes back before that, but
under the kingdom.
yes.
Yeah.
And so a big chunk of their history is tied to judiciary. That is correct. But the Department of Law Enforcement is a lot more than just the sheriff's division. It's a lot more than just protecting the courts. They're a lot more than security guards.
Yeah,
They're
but you
law
still got to go
enforcement.
back to the basics.
Yes.
So I think most of our understanding when this was established was we wouldn't detract that the mission completely changed. I think it was to add to the mission, not necessarily change the mission.
I think that's what everybody wants, but the current language of
Yeah, so
of
that's
the
why we have to
bill
go back.
is kind of narrowing it down. If you look at the preamble, it's all protecting the courts. It's a lot of detail with respect to the function. So what we're recommending with the proposed language is to make it clear the function is the whole, and it's a lot greater than just the protecting of the courts.
Yeah, but knowing the amount of violence that are happening at the courts.
Our courts are one of the safest buildings in the state, to be honest with you. We ran some statistics. And Kona, for example, has had 0 incidents this last year. Our courts, you have multiple layers of
Yeah, but that
security.
doesn't mean that, I mean, if you look nationally,
Yes, nationally,
That's
there
really-
are issues. That is correct. We don't
So,
discount that at all.
wouldn't we want to prevent that instead of just saying, oh, it's all safe, so we don't need to provide resources?
Oh, we're not saying that at all, sir. Not one bit. What we're saying is that the allocation of resources with respect to law enforcement and protecting the judiciary and the Capitol need to be measured against the risk. So for example, if you have a TRO hearing, okay, we know things get dicey in those hearings. So we put officers in those hearings. If we have a sentencing coming up in a high profile matter, and this has happened in some courts, call is made down to the deputies. Hey, we might have some exchanges here. Can we get some presence? And the deputies are there. And so it's kind of balancing the communication between.
No, but what's going to happen is if you don't stick to some of the core functions, then they're going to end up having to do what DHHL just did. And we don't want the courts coming in saying, well, you know what? Law enforcement now kind of doing their own thing. So we need our own, we need our own sheriffs. And, oh, you know what? There's nobody at the Capitol. So the legislature and the governor say, oh, okay, we need our own. That we have to figure out how to keep to the core functions that establish the agency and then how we want to grow it so that we can assist DHHL, Department of Ag, and some of the other agencies that
And
need.
our position is those core functions are much greater than the security. The security of the courts and judiciary are essential.
Yeah,
We're
but
not
you would,
saying
you
they're
would,
not.
we would end up growing government by if the law enforcement agency says, we have another priority, we cannot do that. And then so now at some point we have to provide security to the judiciary. There would be additional positions, additional budget.
That's always going to be there. The security of the courts and the Capitol is always going to be there. And that's in the statute already. And that's
But that's
in our
what, but
proposed
that's what
language.
this bill does though, is to ensure that the judiciary does get the security that it needs. That was an oversight, I think, when it got passed.
No, I don't think it's needed. What we're recommending with.
Well,
respect
you're
to
not in the
language-
judiciary. I said, you're in the judiciary. I mean, DHHL just came in. Do you
Yep.
think that that's needed?
No,
Right? The DOE needs police officers because of school. That's where,
and we are working with Department of Education, getting security things. We're
because
working with,
what we're gonna have to do is cut positions from your department, put it in judiciary, and then they would have to loan you the positions. If that's the other way we could do it, is not grow you at all and actually put positions in every agency that they could loan to your department.
I don't know how that would work. I mean, the divisions that we have for Department of Transportation, for example.
Well, I mean, if everyone's their own dedicated positions,
I don't think it's needed.
okay.
Good. So, I mean, it's great that the courts are some of the safest buildings in the state, but isn't it the reason that they're the safest building in the state is because traditionally you guys have been there to protect the courts?
Yes, and we're not looking to leave.
But that's not the information we're getting from other sources that you are actually pulling back to a certain extent.
No, it's inaccurate.
Okay.
Okay, wait, recess. Okay, reconvening. So we're on SB 3009. So recommendation is to pass with amendments affecting the date. Any discussion? Effective.
Okay, yeah, okay.
No, it's already defected. We're gonna go to a clean date, adding a clean date. Any discussion? If not, chair votes aye.
All members present, anyone voting no, anyone with registration, recommendation adopted.
Okay, for JDC members on SB 3009, recommendation is to pass with an amendment. Questions or concerns? Seeing none, Senator Gabbard.
Any no votes or reservations for JDC? Hearing none, no reservations.
Okay, next item. Oh, I still have my, okay. Next item, SB 3139. Department of Health has some recommendations, but what we're gonna do is add the recommendations to cite the recommendations in the committee report. I think it has a blank appropriation already. And we'll accept LRB tech amendments. So that's what amendments. Any discussion? If not, chair votes aye.
SB 3139, passed with amendments. Anyone voting no, with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Same recommendation for JDC SB 3139 with amendments. Questions or concerns? Seeing none, Senator Gabbard.
Any no votes or reservations? Hearing none, never pass.
Okay, is somebody here from Department of Health?
Hi.
Yeah, hi, morning. So these two bills, the one that we just passed and the one that we're on now, those are administrative bills. right? The department asked for those bills. Okay, so we're in a bit of a quandary in the sense where when the department says, hey, this is statute, we need money because you guys passed it. But in this case, you're asking us to amend the statute, which would grow the budget. And then when we ask you about, okay, why are we funding all of these things? And you say, oh, because it's law now. What in the budget, in the department's current budget is not as much as of a priority that you could cut so that you could add these programs?
Are you asking about the crisis services or
Yeah,
the
in
data?
general, because I mean, I'm not sure if you read lately, but we're slowly or quickly reaching a financial situation that's really, really scary. And so both of these bills are, in the millions. So are there other things that you have in the department that are not as much of a priority that you rather have these?
The crisis center is a priority for the department and I believe for the state. We've been looking to find ways to address multiple.
No, but that wasn't my question.
Yes.
My question is, what would you cut? Not what would you add? So we know what you want to add. What we want to know is what you want to cut so that if you want to add this. Because we already sent out the memo asking for 10 to 15% cuts.
We're in a difficult position when you request some cuts. Already, I know we have a lot of vacancies in our department. With the vacancies, we're not able to move forward on many initiatives. So I hesitate to say that might be an area to look at because once they're gone, we're not able to move forward if we get monies from the federal government from grants or even from general funds. But if you're looking at
because the first bill we just passed is 6 million.
yes,
This bill is 2.2 million.
correct. So on the second bill, the reason we've been able to move forward on this initiative without any appropriations last year is that we used some grant monies for that, some federal grants. And we were able to stand up the website that has the publicly available data, which has been helpful, I believe. And we're trying to refine it to capture more information that would be helpful, I think, for you all in terms of looking at our planning for mental health services throughout the state. I would really appreciate if
These are worthy programs. I don't think they're not worthy. What I'm asking is, if you want these programs, where in your budget can you cut so that we can accommodate you?
right now
If you cannot answer, we got to defer.
on this bill.
You need to think about it. So, any other questions?
For this,
Go ahead.
you're asking to be for this bill, this
No, at some point,
3141.
So I guess I'm kind of assuming that when you look at programs like this, you don't try to figure out how much money would be saved otherwise for other parts of the government or for the private sector, because in the district I represent, the mentally ill cause untold, the human part of it aside, they cause untold financial problems for businesses, for people who live there, for land prices, et cetera, et cetera. I guess the question is, is part of your analysis of putting in a bill like this, do you try to figure out how much other people save because of the money you're spending?
That is our goal. We'd like to look at.
But you don't have the stats
So
yet.
you don't have there's no analysis at this point. I mean, intuitively, I think you save more, $8 million compared to what the damage that mentally ill do it every year in our communities is probably a bargain. But, I didn't know whether you actually tried to figure that out.
So
You have the data.
analysis like that would be so complicated, would involve getting information from the hospitals and police and courts and homeless shelters. We could get comparable numbers from, say, Arizona sites and how much it saved the
When you're
state.
asking for $8 million, difficult data should be provided. I mean, it's $8 million. question.
Yeah, so for these programs, do you have the personnel already filled, the positions already filled to handle all these programs that you're asking us for?
For the crisis centers, yes. For the data collection, yes. Those positions for the data side have been through a grant,
Okay, so they're ongoing right now.
right? Until the grant ends, which is in 2025. That's why they're in this bill.
Sure. So when you guys got the grant money and started doing this data or whatever, you never think at the time that the grant money going to run out?
So the,
No, just yes or no, because then at that time when you guys got the grant, you should be doing what Senator Rhodes is saying. You guys should have started getting some data. So when you guys come to us and say, hey, look, during this time, this is what we did, and this is what money we're gonna save and blah, blah, blah. But you guys didn't. You guys wait till it's gonna run out, and you guys then come to the faucet, open them when only thing dripping. See what I'm saying? So that's what they're talking about. It should have been proactive in getting the data for you guys coming today.
Well, that's just a message we have to send to all departments, right? Because that's the trick. Go get the grant, hire people, come back to us and say, hey, the grant's running out. We need to use general fund now. Without cutting anything else. Or without giving us the data to show we're going to save money by investing in this. And so as we're just growing and then we're in a situation like this now, we got to cut.
I appreciate the questioning and where you're all coming from.
You go think about it, but we can move, I'll recommend that we defect the date. It's already defected. We can move it along, but by the time we get to conference, the department really has to prioritize.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, Chair's gonna recommend, it's already blank appropriation and the date is already defected. And then there's judiciary some additional.
If it's okay with Chair San Buenaventura, I'd like to add a section to repeal the sunset date for Act 111 from 2017 that establishes the orders to treat over patients' objections.
That's fine.
Okay. So we'd like to get rid of the sunset too.
Okay, so we'll add that amendment. So recommendation is to pass with amendment. Chair votes aye.
SB 3141, all members present. The recommendation is passed with amendments. All members present. Oh,
The conversation that went on, discussion being the committee report.
Then we can add it.
all members present. Anyone voting no? Anyone with reservation? Recommendation adopted.
Okay,
Okay, JDC members, same recommendation. Any questions or concerns? If not, Vice Chair DeGavard.
With all members present, any no votes or reservations? Hearing none, measure passes.
okay, next item, SB 3328. Now this measure hopefully is gonna save us money. Okay, any discussion? Not, recommendation, it already has a effective date, so recommendation is to pass as is. Chair votes aye.
Okay, SB 3328, passed unamended. All members present. Anyone voting no? Anyone with reservation? Recommendation adopted.
Okay, for JDC members, same recommendation pass as is for SB 3328. Questions or concerns? If not, Senator Gabbard.
Any no votes or reservations? Reservations for Senator Elefante. Measure passes.
Thank you. Next item, SB 3332. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, and adopt the AG's proposed language to define final eviction moratorium. Any discussion? Not. Chair votes aye.
Okay. SB 3332, passed with amendments. All members present. Anyone voting no? Anyone with reservation? Recommendation adopted.
Same recommendation for JDC members on SB 3332. Or is it got unlimited?
No, pass with amendments.
Yes. Passed with amendments.
With
Passed with amendments.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, you're right. With amendments, AG's language. Okay. Questions or concerns? If not, Vice Chair.
Any no votes or reservations? Measure passes.
Okay, why don't we? Okay, there's a break in this agenda where WAM is the lead and then we're going to turn it over to Judiciary. But before WAM turns it back over, we'll go back to SB 2475. So recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, and then also remove relief from criminal liability to good faith reporters, accept DHS's second amendment authorizing the DOE to share information with the registry of DHS, accept OIP's amendment, which would require a response denying the information from the registry, and I guess make a distinction between surrendering a license and having it revoked.
HTSB suggestion.
Any discussion? If not, chair votes aye.
SB 2475, all members present, to pass with amendments, all members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you, JC members, same recommendation on, forgot the bill number already. 2475 with amendments, questions or concerns? If not, Vice Chair.
Any no votes or reservations? Hearing none, measure passes.
Okay, now we move over to the part of the agenda where JDC is lead. We start with SB 2029, prohibits any law, ordinance, or rule from imposing an exclusionary zoning requirement on housing offered exclusively for sale or rent in perpetuity to buyers or renters who are resident of the state. The recommendation here is pass with a bad effective date, April 14, 2012. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. JC members, questions or concerns? If not, Vice Chair Gabbard.
Any no votes or reservations? Hearing none, measure passes.
Ways and Means, same recommendation.
Pass with amendments, SB 2029, all members present, anyone voting no, anyone voting with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Okay, thank you. And next up is SB 2351 relating to Workforce Development Council, requires the Workforce Development Council and local Workforce Development Board to develop written conflict of interest policies consistent with federal law and regulations and a number of other things. The recommended amendments are from Senators Aquino and Moriwaki, and they're fairly extensive, so bear with me. We'll substitute the word board wherever the word council appears and substitute the word Hawaii Workforce Development Board wherever the term Workforce Development Council or State Workforce Development Council appears. Require that the governor appoint the chairperson of the board from the membership of the board. Will delete the exemption of the executive director from chapter 89. Will delete the repeal of statutory language that allowed the board to hold hearings. Will delete the repeal of statutory language that allowed the board to administer funds allocated for its work. Clarify that the Hawaii Workforce Development Board is administratively attached to the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, and transfer back to the Hawaii Workforce Development Board the program identification numbers, appropriations, and positions that were removed from the Workforce Development Council and given the DIR's Workforce Development Division pursuant to Act 88 of 21, and will leave the date effective. Did I get that right, Senator Aquino?
Yes.
And Senator Moriwaki?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Any questions or concerns? No.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For this side.
If you want me to,
No, we're running out of time.
Vice Chair for the vote.
Okay, any no votes or reservations for JDC? Hearing none, measure passes.
Ways and Means, same recommendation, chair votes aye.
Okay, all members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservations, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next up is SB 2682, beginning January 1st, 2025, requires physicians to perform or order tests for lead poisoning in minor patients at certain intervals. The recommendation here is to pass unamended. Unless you want to badly. Unamended 2682. Questions or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Any reservations or no votes? Hearing none, measure passes.
Ways and Means, same recommendation.
Same recommendation, pass with amendments, all members present, anyone voting no. Oh, unamended, I'm sorry, unamended. Anyone voting no, anyone voting with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next up is SB 2991 relating to collective bargaining unit creation, requires the Hawaii Labor Relations Board to adopt rules establishing criteria for the creation of new bargaining units. This is similar to the other long one. Have several amendments recommended by Senators Aquino and Moriwaki. We'll add a preamble to clarify the purpose of the act to amend chapter 89 to establish the authority of the Hawaii Labor Relations Board to develop the criteria for and to assess the request for creating new bargaining units. Will add language to specifically allow any employer, exclusive representative, or employee to petition to determine the appropriateness of a new bargaining unit. Delete sections, so I think there's subsections actually, C and D on page 3, line 6 to 21 that dealt with the denial of petitions. Will make any appropriate technical changes to the appropriations clause in section 2. Add a blank appropriation for the development of criteria and procedures in this bill. Amend the current appropriation to include a 1 full-time equivalent within the Hawaii Labor Relations Board. And unless I was going to defect the date, but if you want the date clean, we'll leave it clean.
Would be good.
Yeah, leave it clean. Okay. Those are the recommendations. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none. Vice Chair Gabbard.
On SB 2991 with amendments for JDC and no votes or reservations. Hearing none, measure passes.
Ways and Means, same recommendation.
All members present, anyone voting no, anyone with a reservation, recommendation adopted.
Okay, thank you. Next up is SB 3171. This mandates the Office of Lieutenant Governor or the appropriate county clerk's office to ensure access to paper or electronic copies of all meeting notices. Recommendation to pass as is. Questions or concerns? If not, Senator Gabbard.
Any no votes or reservations? Hearing none, measure passes.
Ways and Means, same recommendation.
Any no votes with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Thanks. Next up is, sorry.
Amended.
Next up is SB 3362 relating to public service, authorizes the temporary assignment of permanent legislative staff during the interim to executive or judicial branch agencies. The recommendation here is also to pass as it is. Questions or concerns? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Any reservations or no votes? Reservations for Senator Elefante. Measure passes.
Same recommendation, Ways and Means.
To pass unamended, all members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservation, recommendation adopted.
That's it. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.
Okay, we're gonna call to order the 10 a.m. Ways and Means hearing. Okay, House Bill 2520. Okay, we have comments from LRB. Anybody have questions? Auditor in support. Anyone have questions? Ombudsman in support. Anyone have questions? Ethics Commission in support. Anyone with questions? We have DJ Piho in support. Natalie Iwasa with comments. Anyone else wishing to testify? Okay, if not, chairs are going to recommend we pass as is. Any discussion? Not chair votes aye.
All members present, anyone voting no, or, well, not, oh, yeah, okay. Let's see, let me go through it. Senator, Chair votes aye, Vice Chair votes aye, Senator Kino.
Aye.
Senator Decoy. Aye. Senator Hashimoto.
Aye.
Senator Inoue.
Aye.
Senator Kanuha.
Aye.
Senator Kidani.
Aye.
Senator Kim.
Aye.
Senator Lee.
Aye.
Senator Shimabukuro.
Aye.
Senator Wakai.
Yes.
Senator Favela.
Excuse me.
Okay. Recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Adjourn. Okay, calling to order the 10:05 agenda for Ways and Means. First item, SB 2085. Okay, we're gonna defer this to the 23rd at 10:30. Next item, SB 2143. Recommendation is to pass the amendments, blanket appropriation, effective date 2050. Any discussion? If not, chair votes aye.
SB 2143, all members present, anyone voting no, anybody with reservations, recommendation adopted. It's everybody.
So some of these are wildfire related, even though they have money. So we're blanking them out just to see what happens in the end. But so far, they're gonna either have to be cuts to fund this, or this may not get passed. SB 2156. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, blank the appropriation, effective date.
All members present, anyone voting with reservation, voting no, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next item, SB 2284. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, effective date to 2050. Any discussion? Not sure both sides.
Okay, wait now, 2284.
Yeah.
SB 2284.
Pass with amendments.
Pass with amendments. Anyone voting no, anyone voting with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Okay. Next item, we're going to defer till the 23rd, 10:30 in this room.
Which one will be for 20?
2286 is deferred. So next item is SB 2287. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments. Like recess. Because we have the thing in there. Okay, SB 2287. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, effective date to 2050.
Hold on. Can we recess for a minute?
Recess. Okay, it's SB 2287. Recommendation was to pass with amendments. Any discussion? Not chair votes aye.
All members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservation, but recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next item. SB 2345. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments. And then we're gonna adopt from the department's language, amending section 2 to insert a definition for crisis intervention training and crisis intervention officers. Remove section 4 and then amend section 5, line 16, 17 to read mental health emergency workers designated by the director or a crisis intervention officer and effective date to 2050. Any discussion? Not sure votes aye.
All members present, anyone voting no, anyone voting with reservation, recommendation adopted. Awa excused. Oh, Bella.
He's here.
Yeah.
We're gonna see.
Yeah, got it.
He's here.
Yeah.
Aye.
Oh my God.
Okay. Okay, next item, SB 2502. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, effective date to 2050. Any discussion? Not chair votes aye.
So 25, Senate Bill 2502 passed with amendments.
Yep.
All members present, anyone voting no, anyone voting with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next item, SB 2505. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments. Any discussion? Not chair votes aye.
All members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next item, SB 2514. Recommendation is to pass with amendments. Adopt LRB tech amendments. Wait, and then we'll add to the committee report that there is a concern relating the issues of separations of power. So hopefully as we move it along, we can address that. Okay, if not, chair votes aye. Pass with amendments.
Pass with amendments, anyone voting no, anyone with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Okay, next item, SB 2516. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, changing all references of Deputy Comptroller of IT to Chief Information Officer and Deputy Comptroller. Deputy Comptroller. Any discussion? If not, chair votes aye.
All members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next item, SB 2556. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, blank the appropriation, effective date to 2050. Any discussion? Not chair votes aye.
Okay. Pass with amendments, anyone voting no, anyone voting with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Next item, SB 2653. Recommendation is to see here, is to defer. Next item, SB 2710. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, effective date to 2050. Any discussion? Not chair votes aye.
All members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Next item, SB 2746. Recommendation is to pass with amendments. Will adopt LRB tech amendments and will adopt an amendment from PAR Hawaii by amending page 7, line 10, to add that provided further, this act shall not apply to tug operators regulated by the U.S. Coast Guard and who are signatory to a collective bargaining agreement. Any discussion? Not chair votes aye.
Anyone voting no, anyone with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next item, SB 2842. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, and will adopt LRB's, DLNR's language. And also adopting PUC language, amending paragraph C5 to read as follows. 5, advise and make recommendations to state agencies concerning the state's wildfire safety prevention and mitigation efforts. 6, develop and make recommendations to the Public Utilities Commission related to utility wildfire safety and mitigation performance metrics. 7, develop and make recommendations related to the contents of electric utility wildfire mitigation, protection plans and plan update pursuant to HRS 269, and provide other advice and recommendations related to wildfire safety as requested by the PUC Commission, as the PUC. Any discussion? Not chair votes aye.
SB 2842 pass with amendments, all members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next item, SB 2943. Recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, effective date to 2050. Any discussion?
Okay, SB 2943, all members present, anyone voting no, anyone with reservation, recommendation adopted.
Thank you. Next item, SB 3007. Recommendation is to add a clean date. Any discussion? Not chair votes aye.
Passed with amendments. Anyone voting no? Anyone with reservation?
No, no,
Huh? What?
I'm fine.
No, okay. Okay. All voting to recommend. Adopted.
Okay, next item, SB 3008, recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments. And we'll also add from OPSD's testimony, amending page 4, lines 16 to 18 to read as follows. The principal of and interest of on which are in fact payable from and secured by the amount of real property tax levied. Amending page 5, lines 1 to 3 to read as follows. The assessed value of the taxable real property in the tax increment district in the fiscal year prior to the creation of that of tax increment district, and making similar edits to the debt limit exclusion section 1310, page 15, lines 1 through 10. Any discussion? Madam Chair votes aye.
Okay, passed with amendments. Anyone voting no? Anyone with reservation? Recommendation adopted.
Okay, next item, Senate Bill 3022, recommendation is to pass with amendments. And we'll let the committee report reflect that the Maui Metropolitan Planning Organization requested amendments for half of the fees collected to be distributed to their counties. Any discussion? The recommendation pass with amendments for LRB tech amendments.
Anyone voting no? Anyone with reservation?
Reservations.
Reservation. Oh, this is for 302, SB 3022. So one reservation for Inoue, for Canoe, Confella. Anyone else? Okay, so recommendation adopted.
Next item, SB 3115. Recommendation is to pass with amendments.
3153.
I'm sorry, 3153. Recommendation is to pass with amendments effecting the date to July 1st, 2024. So this is a program they already have established. They just need the language so that they can move the money into the special fund.
Okay. Anyone voting no? Anyone with reservation? Recommendation adopted.
Thank you. This item, SB 3242, recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, effective date to 2050. Any discussion?
Anyone voting no? Anyone voting with reservation? Recommendation adopted. One.
Okay, next item, SB 3281. Recommendation is to pass with amendments. Will blank the appropriations and defect the date to 2050. Any discussion? Not chair votes aye.
Anyone voting no? Anyone with reservation? Recommendation adopted.
Okay, next item. SB 3371, recommendation is to pass with amendments, adopt LRB tech amendments, and adopt the state procurement office's requested amendment. Any discussion? If not, chair votes aye.
All members present, anyone voting no? Anyone with reservation? Recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Wow. Oh, man. A lot. Yeah. I know.